both capital. Okay, so the bottom line for the budget is the proposed monthly dues for a developed lot will be $167.21. For an undeveloped lot, $158.79. This just talks about how we're balancing $5,295,101 in revenues with the same amount in expenditures. So it's a zero budget. We're budgeting for just to break even at the end of the year. This is for operations. And this slide right here just gives you a quick rundown of what the dues will go for. This is highlighting a developed lot, as you can see in the middle there on this pie chart, $167.21. Then just going around clockwise here, capital repair and replacement reserve fund, that's $38.63 at that $167.21. Then the road reserve fund, $39.73. Mailbox reserve fund, 71 cents, and operating fund, $88.14. And just quickly cover a capital repair replacement reserve fund. So you could think that fund is covering everything with the exception of roads and mailboxes. So everything else, like this building, equipment, all of that stuff is covered under SURF. See that a little better here. So you can see for a developed lot, so this is breaking down and it's showing you the allocation of the dues here. And you can see this left column here, this left column. So it's showing you the 2025. These are the current dues right now. Operating dues portion, $77.21. SURF roads, mailboxes all in here. And you can see that the entire, so the dues are going up. Bottom line, 7%. Now the operating portion shows 14.2%, but that's because the entire 7% here of the monthly dues have been allocated to operations. And I'll get into why here in just a second. And you can see for an undeveloped lot, there's the $158.79 for an undeveloped thing. The entire amount of that 7% increase to the dues is allocated to operations. And you can also see here between both developed lots, so I'm focusing on the capital portion here, you can see the breakdowns. Whether it's a developed lot or undeveloped lot, those capital portions are, the capital amounts, I should say, the dollar amounts are the same. So you can see that SURF is, $38.63, roads $39.73, mailbox 71 cents. You can see it's the exact same dollar amount as well for capital dollar amounts for the dues allocation for undeveloped lots as well. Okay, the next slide actually has this chart, but it's more expanded. But basically, what this chart is showing you, it's a table, but it's showing you all the. Let me just go to the next. So as you can see, this chart starts here at year 2020, then going from left to right, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, till we get to 2026. So it's showing you all the dues breakdown all the way back to 2020. And of course, with this type of screen, unfortunately, it's not as easy to see in terms of showing the entire thing and still being readable. With a large room like this, but it's basically, the bottom line is it's showing you developed lots. Let's just look at one. We'll just look at the year 2020. We'll go all the way back to the year 2020. So you can see for a developed lot, this is the annual amount, operation dues, annual amount, $711. Let's just start with this. So the monthly dues, $144.31. So that's what it was back in 2020. That's showing you what it is on a per monthly basis. And then this is breaking it down into annual amounts. So the annual amount of operating dues, $711.60. There's the rec special assessment portion of that, which obviously expired at the end of May of 2023. And then you can see the surf and roads and mailbox allocations. These are all annual amounts. And then you see, like I said, the monthly amount, $144.31. So where I'm going at with this slide is it's showing you, let's just look at the capital portions of this. So this is the year 2020. So you can see the capital portions from 2020 to 2021. So now we're looking at 2021 in this column here. So the exactly the same. 2022, the same. 2023, this is where it's a little different because of the fact that that rec special assessment expired at the end of May of 2023. And then, so we had a different dues amount from June through December of 2023 that same year. But then this column here, this annual total of 2023 is showing you the annual total amounts, but you'll see capital dues stayed exactly the same. They stayed the same in 2024, but then they went up. This is the first year that the capital dues have gone up since 2019, actually. So 2019, there's a dues increase, and then or 2020 when the dues went up, I should say, from 2019 to 2020. From 2020 through 2024, the capital allocation of the dues stayed precisely the same, no different. So your capital dues amount did not go up by 1 penny, like from 2020 through 2024. It was 2025 where the capital dues allocations went up 7% in each of the categories, and same with operating dues. But then if we focus on so basically, as you can see, so now we're going to focus on this line item where you see these bolded $144.31. So that was your monthly dues in 2020. And then in 2021, it was still $144.31. 2022, $144.31. January through May 2023 was $144.31, but then it dropped June through December to $141.81. That gave you an annual total or average. You could think of it that, well, that's what it is. The average $142.85 per month. And then in 2024, it went up a little to $146.06. That's actually a 3% increase from the $141.81 here. And then, so 2025 was really the first year where it went up a full 7% from $146.06 to $156.28. And then, so the proposed dues in 2026, it's going up 7% from $156.28 to $167.21. And by the way, in case anyone was wondering, so you can see this line item right here, this showing you the annual amount. You know, you'll notice that it went down from 2020 to 2021. It went from $711.60 and it actually dropped to $707.64. Well, that was because in the rec special assessment, that operation special assessment, it was built into that to go up 3% each one of those years. So when it went up 3% from 133.32 annual amount to 137.28, the operation dues were dropped by the equivalent dollar amount to keep them flat from one year to the next. That's why it still stayed at 144.31. So that's why the operating dues, annual dues, are dropping from each one of these years, but you'll notice the rec special assessment dues going up, but that's why. So now if we go back to the previous slide. So as this is telling you this verbiage up here, it's just basically telling you between 2020 and 2026, as you saw from that last slide, the dues were $144.31 in 2020, and they pretty much stayed that way for fairly close to that, even when you got into 2023 and 2024. So to go from $144.31 to $167.21 in 2026, that's an increase of if you just look at it on the face of it, 15.9% that's exactly what it is. Now, what this is telling you right here, you could think of this portion of it, you could think about it in terms of like with the capital, with the 10-year capital plan, so we build in a 4% inflation rate into that. So if something was $100 current cost in 2005 to replace, then if it gets into 2006, then it goes up to $104 because of the 4% inflation. And then it's doing that each and every year whenever we move it out. So this is kind of telling you, if starting in the year budget to go from 2020 to 2021, but starting in the budget year 2021 through 2026, if we built in like a constant increase each one of those years, then it would be 2.485%. So that just means so what I mean by that is in 2020 it was $144.31. If we bumped it up 2.485% from 2020 to 2021, then it goes up to $147.90. Then in 2021, if we bumped it up another 2.485% to go from 2021 to 2022, then it becomes $151.58. And if we did that so on and so forth all the way until we got to year 2026, then we would be at $167.21. So that's just telling you, if dues went up at a constant rate from going from 2020 and all the way through 2026, then it would be 2.485%. It's technically a little less than that, but it's rounded. But so what this is telling you, this last little paragraph in here is telling you between 2020 and 2025, the effects of general inflation produce a cumulative price increase of approximately 24%, which is over 4% per year. So that's just giving you it's just giving you some perspective in terms of like the inflation rate went up on average over 4% per year from 2020 into 2025. But if we had increased the dues rate at a constant rate from 2020 into 2026 to arrive at $167.21, it would be less than 2.5%. That's the main takeaway with this. Okay, this table, which is being put on here, and it's just this goes on here every single year. I think they started doing this maybe back in 2018 or possibly before that. That was before my time here. But what this is explaining to you is it's showing you, let me just zoom in just a little bit more here. Okay, so you can see this far left column in the gray shaded area. That's our dues right now, $156.28. A lot of this information. Operating dues $77.21, and then the numbers below that are all the capital contributions. As you can see, dues $156.28. 2026, that kind of cream colored shaded region, you can see that's where the proposed dues increased to $167.21, 7% increase. And this is all tied into both the operations and the capital. So now this is kind of what this is getting at is the 10-year capital plan. So you'll notice that the dues are kind of locked in place 2026 through 2035 because it's a 10-year capital plan. So it's at $167.21. So what this is showing you is the capital plan has been budgeted and built in a way to where theoretically, if the dues stayed the same all the way through 2035, the capital portion of that would support that 10-year capital plan without a dues increase. And the capital plan is I said, also built in like the inflation rate. Now, would that be a smart thing to do to keep it like that through 2035? Obviously, that would not. But this is showing you that theoretically, that the dues increase, especially the capital portions, if they stayed the same all the way through 2035, it could support the 10-year capital plan. And we'll get into that here in just a bit. Okay, so this pie chart here. Now, the rest of this, I can start quickly going through this stuff. So we will not be spending as much time as we did on that last slide for the others. That I can guarantee you. But this pie chart right here is just showing you. And by the way, too, I should say all these dues. So the dues amount. This is built also on a 95% collection rate. And as you can see at the top, we have right now currently 2,777 developed lots, and we have 339 vacant lots. This number changes from year to year, and that's because we have lot consolidations. That's really the biggest thing that does it. When they have a lot and they buy the lot next to them, then they consolidate that lot into their developed lot, and so then in that case, like a vacant lot can just flat out kind of disappear in a sense from the due structure, or a vacant lot can be developed. So as soon as someone develops a vacant lot, and that vacant lot becomes a developed lot instead of a vacant lot. So that gives you an idea of how that changes around. But so the whole due structure is built off of a 95% collection rate, and that's what it was the year before in 2024, and for the budget year 2025 this year before that, and so on. And so what this is showing you is it's showing you the pie chart of all the dues revenue coming in, operations, capital dues, and also like a couple different sources like marina and golf. And it's showing you what makes up basically the total funding coming in to the association. So you can see that right here that this, we'll just go clockwise here, like with the light blue shaded the largest pie slice. You can see that operations, $88.14 a month, that's $3,098,404. That's 50% of all the dues coming in. And then this dark blue, this is showing you the net marina income. So basically what this means is this is looking at the operating net income for marina, the operations aspect of it. That technically supplements operating dues by $6.41. So if we didn't have the operating portion income of marina, then basically the dues would have to go up $6.41 to maintain everything. Obviously, we'd still have some cost savings if, for example, the marina just disappeared. But that's just giving you an example of that. That kind of teal color, the next one is golf, so that's 92 cents. So that's telling you that it's supplementing operating dues by 92 cents per month. And then this mustard colored slice here, this is surf, $30.63, 1.372 million. Yellow here, this is the roads, and roads also, it covers roads and it covers all of the culverts and the culvert vegetation control, so it covers all of that work, and that's $39.73. And this tippy top slice, the smallest one, is the mailbox fund, and that's 71 cents a month. Okay, so now we're getting into operations. So now we're just going to talk about operations until we get to capital. So you can see, it's a little difficult to see with this projection here, but this is showing you by department. So it starts with common costs at the top, operations, county facilities, maintenance, security, ACC, rec, which is obviously the rec center and the pools, parks. On this particular one, pools is split out. And then down here we have, this is where it's getting into departments that, or the operating regular dues or the operation dues, 2.7 million. Golf enterprise, which is golf and turf combined, 62,827. So the reason why golf and marina are down in this section is because these two departments have a operating net income. All the other departments have an operating net loss, which you can expect that, since these departments like operations, accounting, facilities, maintenance, these aren't revenue generating departments. They do have some revenue coming in, but that's why these all show up with negative brackets, basically showing you that it's a net loss, so to speak. They're not, like I said, they're not operating revenue, or they're not revenue centers in a sense. And the same thing with marina. Meaning marina is like golf, where it has an operating net income coming in. But from column to column, you can see from 2025 to 2026, this is showing you the increase or decrease or the percentage change overall for the department. So if you were curious, it's showing you by department the percentage change. And like I said, when you have, well, like something like facilities, that's a good column right here. So, row right here. So facilities so it doesn't just have expenses, it has revenue. Like, for example, the Christ the King Church lease, the library lease, the El Agave lease, like all of that revenue goes into facilities. So this $184,525 net loss, that is net of revenue. What it's showing you, it has a decrease. You can think about it, it has an overall decrease to overall net expenses of 10.2%. And that's, for the most part, that's because the revenue in these contracts for Christ the King and the library and so on and so forth, like that stuff goes up from one year to the next. Sure. No, you're talking about the lease here? Yes, they are. Those are three separate. Yes. Yeah. 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 Actually, I'll get into that too in just a second. And by the way, also in terms of for FTEs, for the budget, as you can see, as this notation shows you right here that I'm highlighting. So there are no budget increases to total payroll FTEs, and FTE is a full-time equivalent. So let's just say we had one full-time worker, and then that person left and went somewhere else, and then we hired two part-time people. You know, those two part-time people would be one FTE in this case. That's just giving you an example. So if you have one FTE is literally it's one person working 40 hours a week. So if one person, like I said, if one person left and then we found these two people who were willing to work 20 hours apiece per week, then these two people would be one FTE. So you could think about it like that. So the FTEs have not increased from the 2025 budget to the 2026 budget there. Yes, operating expenses. So the capital budgets, if that's that could have been maybe what you were getting at. Were you talking about capital but basically it's, in terms of just operating net income, they're standing on their own. But that does not include capital, meaning like all capital is like budgeted for separately in the capital budget for the entire association. What? I didn't hear you. Yes. Oh, yes. And we'll get into that here. You'll see. Yeah. Now this last pie chart in this presentation, this is showing you, this is focusing on, like I said, now we're into the operating portion of it. This is showing you the operating dues in terms of like this is what your operating dues are paying for. So if we just went clockwise around here, we start off with this kind of brown rust color. So this is common costs, which is property taxes, views, insurance, legal expenses, so on and so forth. And then going around this kind of peach colored slice or dark peach, whatever. So this is operations, which means administration. And then here's accounting going around. We're just going around this pie here chart. County monthly dues. So that means of the monthly dues that you pay, in this case, $12.07 goes for accounting. And facilities, $4.84. And like I said, these are all net of any revenues that go into those departments. So meaning the expenses over and beyond the revenues, your operating monthly dues, $4.84 of that goes to fund facilities. Maintenance, $15.51. Security ACC, this is where hazardous trees are in, $14.65. The rec center, $9.69. Pools, as you can see, $3.24. Okay, so in terms of like, now we're going to get into the operating budget itself. We'll go through all the budgets. We'll go through them really quickly, so it won't take as long as you think it'll take. But this is basically telling you here with the verbiage. So the dues increase, the 7% dues increase. So we've targeted the line items that we know will go up or anticipate will go up, such as hazardous tree removal, forest management, payroll expense, property and casualty insurance, fuel, utilities, infrastructure and facilities to maintain those. And another good point to make too, so that 5-year rec special assessment that expired at the end of May 2023, we have not reinstated any use fees for that for residents out here. And in 2026, we're continuing with that with no plan to reinstate use fees for residents. So there's no use fees in the budget in 2026 for the rec center. This is also another good note. So when we renewed our insurance, most of our major insurance renews in June. So June 1 through the end of May basically is when those policies run. So there was another increase of close to, as you can see, close to $36,000 to renew the major policies, or 19.5% increase is what that translates to for policy renewals. And these policies, like I said, they're renewed and they're effective as of June 1, 2025. They'll run through the end of May. And as I've already pointed out, the proposed dues increase of 7% is solely allocated to operations, and I'll get into why here in a second. And actually, this is the big reason of why. Actually, and of course, everyone knows and remembers about that November bomb cyclone event that we had out here that really was an expensive event for the community. Okay, so out of all the increase in expenses between the 2025 and the 2026 budget, 35% of the increase of all total expenses has been allocated to hazardous tree and forest management. And as you can see, it's the second paragraph here, in beginning of year 2021. And as you can see from this chart here, this graph, hazardous tree expenses, so this goes from 2014, and the last data point on here is through July 31, and July 31, 2025. But you can see 2014 through 2020, in a sense, like it remains, kind of in the ballpark where it's been from year to year. But then from 2020, it really took off. So in 2021, total expenditures, so like for example, in 2014 was, I'm just giving you rounded numbers, 32,000. This is everything in terms of anything that was spent out of operations or out of UDR transfers that the board can approve for hazardous tree removal costs. But in 2014 it was 32,000. 2015 it was 16,500. 2016 it was 19,250. 2017 it was 29,150. 2018 it was 64,160. 2019 it was close to 48,000. 2020 was 59,300. And in 2021, that's when it really started going up. In 2021, 140,158. 2022, it was 203,283. 2023, it was 144,438. And then 2024, obviously, this real dramatic increase. This is sweeping in now bomb cyclone expenses. So that it was real close to 460,000 in 2024. So in 2024, 113,880, that was just regular tree removal. In terms of for bomb cyclone expenses, for common area tree removal, it was 64,113. Bomb cyclone expenses, storm tree removal, close to 227,000. And then we had a $55,000 approved transfer out of UDR for $55,000 for additional tree removal costs. That's what comes up to the $459,690. Now, through July of 2025, we're at real close to 181,000, and the board actually approved 100,000 additional expending out of UDR for hazardous tree costs. This is at the beginning of June, and that was at the first board meeting in June. 100,000 was approved, and at the end of July, we've already spent 53,600 of that in tree removal costs. So where I'm going out with this is that's why for 2026 we have chosen to specifically allocate that whole 7% dues increase to operations, and the hazardous tree removal line item for 2025 is 100,000, and for 2026 we're increasing that to 300,000 to get ahead of these tree removal and forest management costs.
Thank you, Joe. Oh, good morning. Yeah, forest health, interesting topic, especially when you can see the trend line that you're seeing here. Previous experience up in the Cascades here with me managing Suncadia, which some of you may be familiar with, have led to, in their situation, similar sized HOA, budgeting $500,000 a year over the last 15 years for forest health and for fire-wise in the community. The issue that you're seeing here is similar to a lot of second growth Doug fir and conifer forests. These were all harvested out, as many of you know, in the early 1900s. So it has grown back in a manner that is totally overgrown. Trees are crowding each other. The forest health itself, you can see, is in decline. And then it's exacerbated by a weather event, and you can see the result. So the increase that the Finance Committee, the board, and management are putting forth here is from 100,000 to 300,000, but that's just a start. The fortunate thing, we just got rainfall. That the moisture, the fuel moisture percentage here last week was at dangerous levels. I've experienced several significant wildfires. This time last year, I was managing Lake Almanor Country Club in Northern California, and you may recall there were 2 large fires in that area over the last 5 years. This last one was the Camp Fire. It was nearly 1 million acres, and it almost took the community. So I will say that this is a beginning, and we'll call this line item, instead of hazard trees, we're looking at forest health. And toward that end, myself, Mike Brock, and our team have recently been in contact with a company who will be coming out here again to give a presentation, if the board approves it, to show a method of firewizing not only your residential properties, but a test area, 15 acres, to show you what proper firewizing looks like. And it is a company that has some marvelous technology. Believe it or not, these are remotely controlled mastication machines. Up at Suncadia, we generally contracted with EcoDig, a company that charged us anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 an acre to firewise different stands, depending upon the steepness of the terrain and the access. The company that we're looking at here has offered a test plot. I believe, Rick, we brought that to you, $15,000 to do 15 acres to do a demonstration to show. I believe that's the first step that we're looking at. Many of the owners here have overgrowth on your lots, of course, and in a fire event, of course, we're overgrown. And what the firewizing does, for those who don't know, it removes the ladder fuels, which is removes all of the burnable fuels up to 15 or 20 feet on each large tree. It also removes all the slash, they call it, all of the brush and undergrowth. The intent is if you get a wildfire, it will burn through the stand of timber along the ground. It won't get up into the crowns of the trees. Once it's in the crowns of the trees, you have a 1 million acre wildfire, which is what occurred in California. So the 300,000 I feel is a great start. But my first month here, I couldn't believe the number of trees that were down and the significant property damage. Thank God nobody was hurt from that, because it could have easily happened. So that is my spiel on the 300,000. That's what's driving the increase this year, folks, along with inflation. I mean, you can't go to Fred Meyer anymore and get, anything in your bag for $100. So, and fill up your car. I know Olympia just got 6 cents a gallon more on everything that goes in your tank. So all of those costs are being passed along. They're operational costs. So the capital or the reserve fund is not being increased this year in favor of what the board and management feel are the priorities. So thank you for the opportunity, Joel.
Yes, so that's a good question. So UDR stands for Undesignated Reserve Fund. So basically what UDR is well, actually, this is exactly what it is. It's now that we're into year 2025, so think about the operating portion of your dues, just the operating portion of the dues. Now that we're in 2025, if someone had dues owing that went back into an earlier year, 2024, 2023, what have you, but if even in December, if they were just, they were late on their December dues payment, they forgot for whatever reason, and then in January of 2026 or now August of 2026, they've paid they pay up all their dues, so they pay their 2026 dues, and oh, and here's also the December 2025 dues. The operation portion of those dues go into the UDR fund. That's what that fund is for. So it's all past operating dues owing, just the operating dues, not the capital dues portion, but the operating dues portion owing in years, in this, now that we're in 2025, 2024 and earlier, that's what that is. And then as those funds get in there, it builds up, and UDR fund is just like any other capital fund from the perspective and standpoint that the board can authorize expenses coming out of that fund. So management, we can't just, oh, we need some extra money, oh, we'll just dip into this, without going to the board and giving them a UDR request, the same as a capital request for out of SURF or roads.
Would you characterize that as working capital, excess revenues over expenses, or is this just previous year's collections collected in the year forward?
Yeah, actually, I would call that operating dues recoveries from prior years. That would be the best way to think about it. Yeah.
Oh, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. It's twofold. One is that, you have thousands of acres that need to be firewized. And even if we look at the number up at Suncadia at an average of 5,000 was $30 million, was what it was going to take to firewise the community. And it's similar to when I managed hotels, a high-rise hotel. You start painting at the bottom floor, and by the time you get up to the 30th floor, you have to start painting at the first floor again. It's the same thing with firewizing. It's got to be done in a continued manner. Up at Suncadia, similar size, however, their assessments were twice what yours are. Our forestry department was 4 people, certified arborist and 3 very qualified equipment operators. Here, we do not have a forestry person. We have 1 person in compliance, and we have the security department. It's all about the money, folks. That's why this Burnbot, B-U-R-N-B-O-T, if you want to Google it, you can look up their website. This is the company that I referred to. They offer a solution that is, it's nowhere near as costly as what we saw up in Suncadia. And part of the reason they want to do a demo is that they're currently working in several large-scale HOAs in the Lake Tahoe area. Some of you may be familiar with Tahoe Donner. It's nearly 20,000 homes, and it almost was burned with the last big series. So Burnbot's working very closely there, not only with the HOA, but with individual homeowners. And so they offer economies of scale when they come on site with these machines and crews, and can offer homeowners the ability to firewise your lot for you at the same time. And I'm not pitching them at all, let me tell you, but when we discovered what their cost per acre was, I was shocked. It's a third of what Echo Dig was charging, and you can Google them as well, Echo Dig, E-C-O-D-I-G, and they're well known throughout Washington and Oregon. They're one of the best. But going back to it, if your neighbor doesn't firewise and you do, and in a fire, you may have seen the safety committee's presentation here last month, where they played a video showing that if you don't have these steps to create defensible space around your home, you can, just an errant spark can be what it takes to start your structure on fire. So I hope that answers.
So in the interest of time, we have to be out of here by noon, hopefully 11:30. We got to turn over the room for another activity. So if possible, I'd like to try and hold as many of the questions towards the end of the presentation so that we can get through the body of the presentation. I don't mean to cut people off, but if we get sidetracked too much here, we're not going to get through the presentation. So appreciate your patience.
And don't worry, I'll go through the rest of this pretty quickly to save as much time as possible to the end for questions. So now so at this point now we're going to go into the operating budget. We'll just run through every department, and then after that, then we'll go into the capital budget, and then we'll be done with the presentation part of it. And fortunately, this is not as easy to see on this screen in this type of a room in this setting. But okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to run through every single department, and you'll see I can get through all this very, very quickly and efficiently. And I'm only going to focus on the material line changes. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to focus on a line that, this line went up 200%, but it was only a $150 increase, because it was a small dollar amount, or vice versa. Something went up 5,000, but it was a 0.5% increase. So we'll just focus on the material line items, because literally there are only really a handful of type of items that we really focused on that really needed the attention of the increase for 2026. And so we're starting off here with operations, with common costs. Like I said, it has legal, property taxes, insurance, so on and so forth. And common costs is where you can also find your dues. This is where the dues show up, and it'll be in the common cost portion of the income statement. And you can see, and like I said, so anyone who goes online, and at the end of this, I can pull up the website and show you real quickly if you need a reminder of where to look. But anyone can pull up this document, at any time. It's right there on the website. And this is showing you so these columns right here, 2021 actuals, 2022 actuals, 2023 actuals, 2024 actuals, those are all ending numbers for any of those years. And then this column here is the June 2025 year-to-date actuals. And then these last three columns, the 2025 budget, the 2026 proposed budget, and then the percentage change between the 2025 going to the 2026 proposed budget. That's how to read that real quickly. But as you can see right here, that's where all the increases of your dues are going, in a sense, meaning that's one line item that it's plugging into. That's the operating dues portion of that, of the $156.28 that you pay right now. The operating portion goes into 2025 here, and then, so it's going from 2.856 million to 3.261 million. And of course, we already talked about, that's getting the whole, it's the 7% of all dues increase for both developed lots and undeveloped lots. It's going all to operations. So that's why this line is going up 14.19%. So it's not going up, you're not going to read it as a 7% increase, because it would be a 7% increase if it was also comparing the total dollar amount of all operating capital dues. But since this is only breaking out just the operating portion of it, and that whole 7% of your total dues increase is going to this line item, that's why it's showing 14.19%. So I guess that is an important point to make on that. All right. Okay, so this is where, as I talked about, insurance premiums, you see an increase built in. It's actually a 15% increase built into insurance premiums. And when I say 15%, I mean 15% from the June insurance premiums that we had to pay in June of 2025. So I'm assuming that when we renew again in 2026, it'll be a 15% increase on that. Now this is reading 21.5%, 21.55% increase, but that's because, of course, it's a little complicated. But as I said, the insurance policies run June 1 through May 31 of the next year. So the policies that were all renewed right now, then those expenses, so June through December, so 7 months worth, will go into it'll go into 2025, and then the other months will then go into 2026. And then it kind of follows that same pattern in 2026. Because like I said, the increases that we paid for, the policies that have gone up as of June 1 that were all renewed, all of those expenses, since that's a 12-month policy, then June through December, those expenses get billed into 2025. And then the remaining months of that policy through May 31 will then show up in 2026. The only other real notable line item on here, so we do have an increase built in for anticipated legal expenditures. This one is a little more difficult to forecast since we don't know from year to year. I mean, from year to year, we don't try to use legal as much as possible, obviously, to save on costs. So this one we built in 100,000. So it's going from 67,500 2025 budget to 100,000 in 2026. Now on to the accounting budget. So this is where, so this will set the stage for the main increase right here. One of the biggest increases built into the budget, or one of the most material line item changes, will be payroll and benefits, and this will apply to every single department. So this is all done as according to the collective bargaining agreement that we have with the Teamsters Union. So we have to follow that. 2020. So this current agreement that we're on it's a 3-year agreement, 2024 through 2026. So the 20 will be the last year of this current contract. then we'll have to renegotiate a CBA for, for another 3-year term. And we'll do that. We'll start that next year. But so what the CBA says, so this follows exactly what the CBA says. The CBA says that from 2025 to 2026, that rates have to go up 3%. That's in the contract. And then how this works for budgeting purposes is then we look at exactly who's in the positions right now, what are their exact pay rates, and then those are, as according to the union document, the CBA, then those are all bumped up 3%. So accounting is an easy one to see. You can see why that says exactly 3%, because the good thing with the accounting departments, we've had no changes in personnel. All the people are exactly the same in 2025 as they will be in 2026 and even in past years. So meaning all the rates go up exactly 3%. So that's exactly what you see, 3%. Payroll benefits, medical benefits right here. So what the CBA also said for that is in 2024 and 2025 that Sun Valley would cover 100% of the medical benefits, monthly premiums. And then, so what the CBA says for 2026 is basically what the medical benefit cost is in 2025. We will cover up to we will cover that plus up to a 10% increase of the 2025 rates in 2026. So we know exactly what it'll be. It'll be, right now it's currently per month, medical and dental, it's $777.09 exactly, it's what it is. So it's budgeted in for that increase by 10% per person, obviously per month, and for 2026. Yeah, that's only for the employee, by the way. So that's what the CBA says, that we can cover the employee, only the employee. We don't cover dependents. Yeah, that's a good point. There is a 401k line item that you see, payroll benefits 401k. So what the CBA says for that is people make contributions into the 401k program, and Sun Valley will match those contributions up to 1.5% of their yearly earnings is what that says. So what we budget for roughly half of that. And it seems to be a good, last year was the first year we started budgeting for it, and it seems to be a good amount to stick to. For accounting, really the only other, well, it's not even see, I'm breaking my rule for covering something that's not even material, but yeah, I'll just for the fun of it, I guess. This for audit and tax services, I mean, it's going for $49,000, $50,500, but audit and tax services, in case you're wondering what this covers, is it covers the audit, tax return, and the reserve study. The reserve study is also in this line item. So it doesn't have to be as expensive for the reserve study line item, because this year we had to do a level 2 reserve study, which means an on-site visit. Next year, so you have to do an on-site visit every 3 years. So next year we go back to the level 3, which means just a reserve study update. And then we can do that for another 2 years, and then third year we'll have to have another level 2. But meaning 2026, the reserve study is more expensive because of the level 2 on-site visit. But it's just what that builds in is it builds in looking back at audit fees, tax fees, reserve study fees increases over the years, and it's forecasting based off of past fees. Okay, so now we're budgets the same way. Now you'll see this is going to nicely pick up speed here. So facilities, as I pointed out, this is where all the lease income is. As you can see, lease income for the restaurant, lease income for Barn 8, and that is Christ the King Church lease income for the library. And so the 2026 budget amount for the lease revenue is exactly what those lease documents say. So it's building in because the lease, the lease amount, the revenue rent amount goes up in 2026, and it builds all of that into it. Salaries, benefits, exact same drill. This one, you'll see it's 3% too, because there's just there's one individual in facilities budgeted in here. So that's why it comes out as a nice even 3% increase. Utilities, okay, so another line item, utilities, how we budgeted for utilities is we took the 2024 actuals, since we took the whole year of 2024 actuals, and then we increased those by 10% for the 2026 year. So we did that for all utilities, we did that for all fuel. Of course, we already covered insurance. We did 15%, as I said, for insurance. And by the way, so all these operating budgets that you're seeing here, so all the department managers provide their input for these operating budgets. So they provide the numbers, and I'll take a look at the numbers, and if I think a number looks crazy, then it'll get adjusted. And once in a while that can happen, you know, I need $1 million for supplies, and it's, well, forget it, you get 5,000, you know. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. I haven't had anyone ask that, but. Facilities has other professional services, 7095, in case you're wondering. But so it's $15,000 budget in here, and what that will cover is additional janitorial services, especially like in the summertime on an as-needed type basis. So it's seasonal janitorial type additional services. That's what that is. Now we're going into the golf department. So, okay, so for the revenue right here, so the most notable thing to talk about, like in terms of golf, so you see this 2024 column right here, actual. So all these revenues are built off of, so Kevin Leduc provided these revenue numbers, and he based this off of the 2024 actual numbers, and then increased those by 3%. From year to year, sometimes with golf, you know, like with revenue numbers, they can provide revenue numbers, and I'll look at it, and then I'll think, well, wait a minute, that's a little conservative. I'm going to bump those up, you know, like. But this year, Kevin Leduc's numbers, I have to say, I think these numbers are safer numbers to go with in terms of a 3% increase. Just looking off of golf had obviously a fantastic year last year and the year before and stuff, but it appears that possibly we could be kind of reaching a little saturation point in terms of revenues. So the 3% amount in terms of using 2024 actuals and building a 3% into that, I think is a realistic number to use for 2026. The rest of all his expenses, there isn't anything that's really huge in terms of like any big increases, just typical type increases built into it. Salary numbers. Now, this is where, like, for example, might as well point out something like this. So here, you're not seeing a nice, clean 3%. That's 6.55% increase. And like I said, this is because this is built into from year to year, we look at exactly who's in those positions and what they're getting paid. And golf also happens, one of the positions in golf is a salary exempt position. Of course, the Washington State law says for salary exempt positions, I believe for 2026, it has to be it's either 2.25 or, you know, basically 225% different. So basically, it's the minimum wage increased by 2.25 times. It's either 2.25 or 2.5. It's one of those two. But for 2026, so meaning it's the minimum amount that we have to pay someone to keep them in an exempt position. So that's built into this. Anticipating if Washington State actually did go up to that amount. And it could be, like I said, 2025 versus 2024. All it takes is some of these percentages you'll see will be less than this. So it won't be at 3%, it'll be less than 3%. Then that, of course, that is because when you have union people and they all have these, you know, the scales in terms of seniority and grades and levels and stuff like that in terms of what the pay. But when you have someone leave who has a higher seniority, then they're replaced with someone with a less seniority rating who starts in at the union starting rate, it'll be a lower pay rate. So then when when they show up with the replacement has a lower pay rate than the person who left because of the union rules, and when that person gets an increase of 3% from one year to the next, you see how the overall payroll would actually drop in that case. budgeted from one year to the next. Or the opposite could happen. Someone with a lower grade and step left, and then we got someone in here who had a lot of experience and stuff, so then they would have a higher grade and step, union step, then the opposite could start happening. That's why you can see some differences. That's why it won't be a clean 3% from one year to the next, especially with departments like golf and turf, and maintenance is another one where you have more turnover in it. In departments where you don't have turnover, accounting is really the best example. When you don't have people changing or leaving, and that's where you see clean 3% increases according to the CPA agreement. Utilities, exact same drill for this one. All of 2024 utilities increased by 10%. Fuel, of course I pointed that as well. Fuel, same thing. The full year data, 2024%, increased that by 10%, and that's what we're using for 2026. So for the rec center, the biggest thing to point out for the rec center, which is an important thing to point out, so now we're focusing on, it's a good thing we have that little discussion about salaries, like I said before, but you can see for the rec center, and this is a notable thing to point out, that these salaries are increasing almost 55%, so it looks like, good grief, what the heck is going on? Why is rec getting all of this salary increase? Well, that's because, like I said before, we did not increase FTEs, or no budget FTEs overall for the organization, but we did have, maybe you might remember last year, it was towards the end of last year, where the operation or the chief of staff position in the administrative department, he became the rec manager. So basically, he moved from the administrative office to the rec department. So meaning the rec department gained a rec manager, but then the administrative office lost the chief staff position. So meaning the FTE just switched places. Instead of being in the administrative office, now he's at the rec center. So that's what about the FTE staying exactly the same. So like if for whatever reason, and there's also one individual in the administrative office too that is billed to the rec center, and that's because the welcome center is basically the concept of the welcome center is to be this one-stop shop, so to speak, where we can handle wide variety of all community concerns and services. So one person is dedicated for rec-related type work at the welcome center. But, like if someone said, well, I disagree, I think that person should be charged to the administrative office, you see where that wouldn't make a difference. If we took that person's salary out of the rec center and then put them in the administrative office, it's just shell gaming at that point, meaning the salary is still there for the organization, it's just now in a different department. So when I said that the FTEs are not going up in 2026, that's completely true. But one individual did go from the administrative office to the rec center. But overall, the organization was paying for his salary and budgeting for his salary anyways. It was just in a different department. But that's why you see that increase of 55%. That's really the only reason. And same thing with medical. That's why you see medical costs really going up. And same thing, because his slot for medical insurance was previously budgeted in the admin office, now it's being budgeted in the rec center. Utilities, of course, we covered that. You will see some other type increases like here. This is not material, but I'll just point it out just for the heck of it. But like, for example, like other supplies going from 6,500 to 8,000. This is all based off of input from department managers, what the department managers feel that they'll need for 2026 based of like plans they know about what the type of workload and what they're going to undertake next year. Maintenance department. Here's a perfect example where we were talking about the salary line item. Now you're seeing the exact opposite effect. So you're seeing salaries only going up by 0.22%. And this isn't because I don't like Mike Brock and I'm going to penalize him, and drop his payroll. Of course, Mike Brock's a great guy. But this is literally because in his department, he's had some turnover in terms of maintenance, some maintenance staff who have left who had a higher pay grade and step and grade, like in terms of like the union pay scales, and then people coming in taking on the union starting pay rates. So then those get built for a 3% increase, but that's what can make 1 year in terms of the 2025 budgeted payroll look different from 2026. That's why you don't see a nice clean 3% increase. That's why you see differences. In another line item here in maintenance, the weather response payroll, so it was $15,000 in 2025. We've let that for 2026, and what this is going to cover is it's going to cover like some snow events. So this will cover a good few weather events coming through. And as you can see so far, or you can see at the end of 2020, well, let's just look at through June of 2025. You can see that they've used $9,750 of that. And obviously, we haven't gotten to the fall yet. The fall is when the windstorms and all that stuff really pick up. So I'm sure that could probably be used by the end of the year. Then we also have in here weather response, line item for weather response, this last item on the page. You'll see it's $35,000. This will cover like weather type supplies and so on and so forth, snow melt, things like that. Now, we used to have a line item in here for maintenance that covered the baby plow. You probably remember him, who came out here at contract. So that was a contract service that we used during the snow events, and we used to have a line item in here. So that line item obviously is not budgeted in 2026 because we have our own snow plow that was purchased. Okay, so for the Marina Department, you can see probably the main thing would be the revenue line items. So from 2025 budget to 2026 budget, so we have an increase here close to 5.5%. This is basically looking at these numbers. It kind of gives us a couple options in terms of with the 2024 numbers, like the distribution of these numbers, or the composition of these numbers between like resident slips and non-resident slips. The composition was different in 2024 in terms of more non-residents versus residents. Of course, that composition could change around a little for 2026, but it gives us some flexibility in terms of looking at the composition of people and or fee increases for those marina slips. Okay, we'll point out, so you know how I talked about before on those other, on that original departments and the operating net income. So this is where you can see, since Marina is definitely one of those departments. So you can see this line item. So at the beginning of each one of those departmental income statements, or in terms of these budget draft income type statements, you'll see the income will always be at the top. It'll be before all these expenses. So you can see this line item here is showing you the total marina income. You can see from year to year all the way back to 2021. So you can see total marina income, $249,857. And then this right here is showing you the total marina expenses, $22,181. And then this last item here is the total marina net income, $227,676. So this $227,676 of operating net income, this is going back to that first pie chart. That's what's contributing to, in a sense, meaning if we didn't have this $227,676 in operating net income from marina, then we would need more dues revenue. You could think, so then the dues would technically go up to make up for that. But that's why I was showing on the pie chart where that was contributing to, in a sense, lowering the operating dues. Okay, so now the admin budget. So this is why, for example, in the admin budget, it's kind of the opposite of the rec budget. This is why, so you're seeing some decreases here in the admin budget from one year to the next. Rec department, obviously, or I mean, the rec department gained a person, we lost a person in terms of just a lateral transfer over there with that manager. Difference of pay rates. And also in this department, this is where you will see the, like the AGM, let me find it here. Yeah, so you'll see the annual general meeting type costs in here, 24,000 for the AGM type elections, unelect, all that sort of stuff. And when we put on events and things like that, like concession income and that sort of stuff will also show up here in the administrative department. Most of these are fairly, oh yes, now we do have this one line item here. Okay, this other professional services line item here, you can see through June we have 38,500. Now this is for the so this is the HR consultant. The board passes. The board, I believe they passed. Yeah. So the board authorized for additional spending for this is the HR consultant. So that's what that 38,500 is for. So all outsourcing of heavy HR type work through One Digital. And then you'll see in 2020, so we didn't have, when we did the 2025 budget, that was not on the radar to add. So that's why it said 0. That came after the 2025 budget was adopted and ballots were already sent out at that point. But in 2026, the bulk of the work that we needed to outsource with them, I believe, is done. So that's in 2025, or I mean in 2026. So that was, so I've decreased that to 25,000. Okay, parks. So someone asked a question about parks. You can see parks has a 0 budget, both the 2025 and 2026. And that is because Mike Brock, the maintenance manager, this started in 2024. So the budget year 2024, Mike Brock has elected for expenditures, so on and so forth, to be accounted for in the maintenance department. That's why. So it's kind of like the parks department basically got rolled into the maintenance department in terms of expenditures for like mowing the grass and all of that stuff. Pool income here, there's not a lot of change. There's the salary. Of course, this is all predicated on lifeguard type costs, as you can see. So we have same thing with FTE. So we have the standard FTE structure that we're using in 2026 is carrying on into 2020. I mean, in 2025 is carrying on into 2026. This is the pool management. It's called pool management right here. But so we budgeted 55,000 for, this is CESCO coming out and basically maintaining all of the pools. And so we budgeted from 55,000 to 60,000 basically to cover any sort of additional pool type maintenance that might be needed in 2026. Okay, so now we're on ACC security. This line item has now this, I'll point this out real quick. So when people pay their building construction fees or new home construction fees, that's recorded in the ACC security, actually this very first line item. new home construction, that's what that is, new home construction fees. You'll see, well, you can see from 2023 to 2024, you can see where it really took this huge jump, and that's because the construction fees essentially doubled. In 2026, I was a little more kind of conservative with budgeting for construction fee revenue for 2026, so I said 185,000. And actually, I will say that in 2024, like these sorts of construction fees and or out of ACC, this is what really contributed to helping us basically pay for those hazardous tree costs back in 2024. So reaching those hazardous tree costs were, you know, in quick action, the board approved for that spending to come out of roads and SURF immediately after that bomb cyclone to address like capital concerns of maintaining the roads and common area grounds. But then, like, as the financial statements were being finalized, especially at the end of December, we had a good amount of surplus, over 300,000 of that, which then allowed me to go back and put a motion in front of the board, which they approved, to reclassify all of those expenditures out of capital back into operations. So essentially what happened, tree costs, you know, those emergency tree costs to maintain those capital assets were paid out of capital, but then those reclassifications switched those expenses out of capital back into operations, and then operations reimbursed capital for all that cash. So basically, it made capital completely whole again, as though it didn't happen. That's the great thing about that. But this ACC security with their, as you can see in 2024, the bottom line, sorry about that, but these increases in the revenue, so the total revenue went from 66,000 in 2023 up to 326,000 in 2024. That's what really contributed to being able to pay for all of those hazardous tree costs out of operations, which they were. So it all came out of operations. Nothing ended up coming out of capital in the end. Okay, this is the hazardous tree. So in here, this hazardous tree removal / forest management. You can see in 2025 it was budgeted, and looking back you can see the different years, you know, of how much it was. And some of these expenses, like I said, they were approved expenditures out of UDR as well. So those had quite a few in certain years, like 100,000 or so coming out of it. But you can see this is where we budgeted to go from 100,000 to 300,000 in 2026, which for the exact reasons that have already been mentioned. Oh, yes, and another big line item here. So our private security that you see out here, that's accounted for in this budget. That's another very large line item. In 2025 was budgeted for 300,000. 2026 is budgeted for 309,000. This is all according to their contracts and their bids for what it will be in 2026. 3% increase, which is exactly what they said. So this isn't like a guess, like, well, we'll just do 3%. This is based off of Pacific Securities contract. And then the last department in operations, so the good thing, so we're basically almost all done with operations here, is the turf care department. So golf and turf care are counted together. Like whenever you look at the monthly financial statements that are posted on the website and talked about it, finance committee and board meetings, when you see golf enterprise is golf and turf care consolidated together. On this budget, you're seeing it separately. Salaries, same thing. You see a little decrease in salaries. Of course, we've already talked about why that's the case. And then all these other sorts of increases in here, like landscape, raw materials, equipment, so on and so forth, is all based off of Greg, his input of what he felt the turf care would need in 2026 based off of what's going on in 2025. Vehicle fuel, same thing. We already talked about that. 10% increase from 2024 actual. Now, the good thing here too, like if you go onto the website and you look at these financial statements or the budget draft here, at the end of the operating section, it will have the all department summary. So if you're ever wondering, well, geez, well, how much would all salaries be? So instead of having to go and look at every single department and add up, you know, it's GL 5,300 just for the salary line item. But instead of looking at all the departments and adding up all these GLs, just go to the all department summary, and this summarizes all GLs together. So you can see the total salaries in budget in 2025, 2,144,586. 2026 is now 2,252,546. Of course, you'll see it going up by 5%. Of course, we already talked about why that's the case from year to year, because this column is the budget change is purely comparing the 2026 budget to the 2025 budget. And then when we get to the very bottom here, you can see that total summary, total expenses for all departments, 5,295,101. Total association net income is nothing, it's zero. It's budgeted to break even. Because if we scrolled up above to the revenue section, this all department summary, you'd see total revenues were 5,295,101. I think we could just through operations. We'll just quickly run through capital. This won't take all that long. We'll hit the highlights of surf and roads. And this slide is just giving you a background of the capital budgeting process. The capital budget is, quite frankly, it takes the longest part to budget it for because we budget out for 10 years. So it's not the operating budget, we're just looking at 2026. Capital budget, we're looking out all the way, in this case now, through 2035. The good thing about this, if you go online on this and look at this presentation, so this, as it says, open surf and roads projects in 2025. So these next two pages, we won't get into this in great detail, but these next two pages right here, you see all these items on here. These are all the things that are currently open. So what I mean by open is these are all things that the board has approved. These have gone in front of the board. The board has approved these capital projects. And some of these will say like approval dates back into like 2020. Those are capital lease, finance lease. Well, now they're called finance leases, but the old term capital lease. Golf carts and utility vehicles, golf cart fleet, and 10 additional golf cart lease here. But so you'll see, so the good thing is this approval date column, this is what's really handy about this column. So if you're ever wondering, what is this project really? You know, like, what is, you know, this thing here says adult center furnace water heater replacement. What is that? You know, like, you could go by this approval date is telling you when it was approved at the board level. So you could go and look up any of these approval dates. You could just go to the Sun Valley website and go to the board section of it and look at, and all the years, past years are right on there. So you could just go into the year and you could look up, just go to the board meeting that matches that approval date. And in that board agenda packet, you will find the project capital request memo in that packet is what you'll see. So that's what's really handy about this. So if you wanted to see what exactly is this 2025 asphalt cart repair path project, well, the approval date was June 26, 25. So you could go right to the June 26, 2025 board agenda. It's on the website. You could just click and open up that PDF, that big agenda document, and you'll find the capital request approval memo right in there for that project. And you could do that for any one of these projects on here. So I think that's probably the most important takeaway from this. But basically, some of these I've marked closed because there's obvious they're closed, like sand trap rake, you know, and fairway aerator, turf care trailer, zero turn mower. Like we've spent all the funds approved for this thing, and obviously, you know, we're not going to spend any more on it, so it's just marked closed. But anything that's on here was open as of January 1 or later in 2025. If you went back and looked at, like for example, December open capital projects, you'd see a heck of a lot more things on here, but now they're no longer on here because all of those things have been formally closed out as of year-end 2024, and they're no longer open projects. They're closed out into fixed assets. Now we're into the accounting part of it, which won't be as interesting to talk about. But basically, now they're instead of being a work in process, instead of progress, now it's an actual closed out fixed asset. But just forget about that part of this. That's just all accounting mumbo jumbo. Same thing for roads. So that first page was SURFs. The first page just has all SURF projects. The second page has all roads projects. So these are all open roads projects. And same drill as I told you before, this approval date right here. You could go and look up those dates. Go find the agenda packet for that date, and you will find the capital project memo. Capital project memo will have the memo explaining what it is and how much they asked for and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so now we'll quickly go through the SURF capital budget. We'll go through the roads budget, then we'll be done with this presentation. So, like I said, unfortunately with this room and this huge screen and stuff, I'll have to zoom in on some of these. I'm not going to go through all these items. I'm just going to hit on the ones that'll be of most interest to people. You don't want me to summarize it? You want? Oh, you want? I'm just kidding. I'm going to quickly just give, if this is just in case any of you outside of this meeting want to go back and you want to look through all this stuff, and I'll just give you a real fast, in a nutshell, rundown of what you're looking at real quick. But you're looking at so this is SURF. As the title says up here, 2026 through 2035 capital budget, and 2026 through 2035 capital budget, this is showing you, this has every single item on here that's on our reserve study. So when you're looking at this, you're essentially looking at the reserve study. Those reserve studies will come out here pretty shortly, like the final reserve studies. But this matches a reserve study right now, the study that will come out. So it starts off with January 1 beginning balance carryover from the previous year. Here's the expected reserve dues collection at a 95% collection rate. You'll see in here there's a anticipated Barn 8 refurbishment loan of $4 million. That's getting into what we'll talk about in a second. And then we're just some interest income. This is on the conservative side, by the way. This previous year's carryback is $600,000. For SURF and roads, like if you went and looked at the financial statements, it'll have like, I'm just going to make up this number. Let's just say we have $1 million in SURF, ending SURF cash that we're anticipating at the end of 12/31/2025. I'm using 2025. So that 600,000 is what's called the board carryover holdback, meaning the amount that the board would not like to drop below. And the usable cash is 400,000. But when you go from one year to the next, it takes it off at the end, but then it adds it back in here. But and you do see 2023 through 2025. These columns don't have to be on here, but I let them on there because a lot of people, it's useful to look at if you wanted to go back into 2023 and start seeing approved stuff in those years. But now we're just going to quickly go through. Like I said, I'm only going to hit the important ones. A lot of the other ones aren't that important. The most important one that we'll talk about for certain is Barn 8 right here. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there isn't another budget town hall scheduled. There's a town hall scheduled on the 27th for discussion on the barns.
Yeah, which is literally the most important thing on the SURF one right here. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and yes, and this, right. Actually, I think maybe what would be most helpful, I'll just talk about this barn here real quick, and then we'll just wrap this up and go right to questions. How about that? Because you're right, this is the most important thing to cover is the barn. Actually, there will be another town hall that's on the barn for that one. Yeah, yeah.
Well, if we can get some help putting chairs away, we can go right up to almost noon today. So we'll have another half hour. Okay? Ah, got you.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, if you want to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just quickly, what I will say with because the most interesting thing for the capital budget is the barn, quite frankly. Like, I can cover the whole roads budget right now just in just a couple of sentences. The roads budget is a continuation of last year's budget, which follows the roads plan, the actual roads plan that came. So it's just continuing with that exact impact design plan for all of roads. 2026, the most important thing on the capital budget, the most thing of interest is this barn 8. And so with barn 8, in 2025, barn 8 was on there. In 2025, here's a big takeaway with barn 8. With barn 8, 2025, yes, barn 8 is this barn. Yes, this building, yeah. So in 2025, the total cost for barn 8 was about 1.2 million. So with Kingworks came out with their estimates for all of this work, the structure, and then those costs, those became 3.7 million. What this thing is showing, what's highlighted here, is it's taking the 3.7 million costs since that came out in February 2025. It's bumping that up an additional 4% for the projected 2026 work. So it's becoming about 4 million or so, and that's what that $4 million refurbishment loan is. Yeah, and I guess the good thing at this point, we can just demus and question time.
So I'd like to, open it up for questions now. What I'd like to do to try and help use microphones in that, if you have a question, come up to this podium here and ask your question or comment or whatever. Yeah, no, anything on the budget. Yeah.
Jane David, 10 Gooseberry Circle. While it's true that our dues have only gone up a total of 16% since 2021, it could also be considered that they've gone up a total of 16% since 2023. In 2023, our budget for operating expenses and capital reserves was around $4.2 million. Now we're projecting that our budget for 2026 will be $5.2 million, an increase of $1 million over 3 years. That is huge. It feels like the tactic now is to raise dues by the maximum every year and find ways to spend that money. The last community survey was done in 2020. Members indicated that their top priority was roads and infrastructure repairs, And Mike Brock has done a phenomenal job on that. I don't think anyone would doubt that. Second priority, maintain existing amenities before building new ones. Yet the admin spaces in the clubhouse have not been renovated so that staff can move back in, freeing up the Welcome Center building for community use. Instead, a single entity is currently negotiating a lease that will involve significant renovation at the clubhouse for a coffee shop in a problematic location without community input under the premise of bringing in revenue for SVCA. Even though SVCA has a history of subsidizing failing businesses, charging below market lease rates, and providing free ads in the views that we pay for. Third priority, environmental stewardship. Starting to focus on husbandry of our forest is great. Proposing to build a brand new community center that will have 50% of its footprint within a habitat conservation area and that will likely draw in more traffic, not great. And the Long Range Planning Committee is currently trying to find developers willing to take a long-term lease on the 15 acres of wooded hillside in Area Y, which will mean substantial deforestation above Lake Louise in order to put in condos or an assisted living facility. This is a direct attempt to circumvent the bylaw amendment that prevents the sale of our common non-trust properties without a majority vote of the membership. I'm not sure if everyone on the Long Range Planning Committee is aware of that. The amendment was proposed and passed because we do not want those properties to be developed. The LRPC is also pursuing a lease of the airfield to Puget Sound Energy for a solar array. More trees would have to come down. Back to the 2020 survey, lowest priority, new large-scale amenities or capital-intensive projects and event-focused infrastructure. I think we can see that there's a disconnect between the community and the current plan. We don't need a brand new Barn 6 to be a community. Our real strength lies in neighbors helping neighbors, and that does not rely on fancy buildings. We ask that you ask all of us what we want and are willing to fund, and then make prudent financial decisions based on the input. That kind of strategic planning requires a formal, well-developed, and widespread survey process that involves all of our members as stakeholders, not just those who send an email or stop by the booth at the Valley Fair, and it can't be rushed through in a few months. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ.
Nancy Alionak, 4 Sandalwood Circle. The proposed event center has a problem with zoning requirements. It doesn't meet them. The Barn 6 location is in the recreation corridor, zoned small town commercial, or STC. New development or redevelopment in an STC district located in a rural community is limited to that which is consistent with the character of the area on July 1st, 1990, in terms of building size, scale, use, or intensity. In 7, Barn 6 was a single-story, 12,300 and some odd square foot barn with a hockey area. On the other hand, the proposed event center for that space is over 19,000 square feet on 2 levels. It features a multi-purpose area, 2 kitchens, an elevator, 6 bathrooms, showers, and so on. The new event center fails to meet zoning code in terms of building size, scale, use, and intensity, and will fail to get a building permit. The second problem is location in the Austin Creek shoreline jurisdiction and habitat conservation area. Under the Shoreline Management Program, Barn 6 is considered a conforming use. The proposed event center is not a conforming use. Exemptions for building in the old Barn 6 footprint only apply to building a conforming use. The expansion, alteration, and intensification of a non-conforming use is prohibited. So I cut this short. The code references and further detail will be posted on the Sudden Valley Connection Facebook page.
Thank you, Nancy. So just to give an update on the status of building on, we have a little tree frog down here. Status on building on that footprint of barn, what is currently referred to as barn 6. It's an active little guy. This is for your morning entertainment. Yeah, thank you. So it's our understanding that it does have to be any construction on that existing footprint where barn 6, the ice barn, currently stands, does need to be approved, and it does need to be conforming use. And so obviously we have to meet those standards. It's our understanding in talking with an architect consultant that we've been consulting with that our proposed construction on that site would be conforming, but we'll have to wait and see what the county says. That's our understanding anyway.
Your consultant is looking at the old plan for a pavilion on the barn 6 site. That would be conformable, and that would meet the requirements of both zoning and building on the permit. He didn't look at what your proposed event center is now.
No, he has. He's been helping us design. He's the one who designed that. So the other thing is, at our first town hall on the barns, we had a great turnout. We had a great dialogue. We had some good ideas come out of that. And actually, long-range planning now is reconsidering exactly what we may plan to build there. And actually, what we're looking at now is, in fact, a pavilion instead of the large barn 6 that was outlined in the presentation here a couple weeks ago. So that's why it's important to attend the town halls. Long-range planning heard some of that comment and commentary and input, and we're seriously considering kind of redirecting what the plans will be. Discussions are ongoing. There will be, as I said, another town hall on the 27th, so stay tuned. Come in, and I think you'll maybe be pleasantly surprised what's coming down the pipe.
Hi, Matt Carter, let's see, 2 Morning Beach Drive, prior board member. Thank you for the presentation. I haven't watched the budget presentation for a while. What concerns me is the gap between the cumulative consumer price index for the last 45 years, since 1980, essentially the beginning of Sudden Valley. It has grown approximately slightly over 3% per year, with some years with really big spikes. The cumulative increase over those 45 years is 292%. So I ask you to think about, and I want to leave this with a question. I don't have a real statement to make about it, other than having been on the board and having looked at the consumer price index versus our meager dues increases in the early years, the middle years, and even in recent years of dues increases. The gap between the consumer price index and our dues continues to grow. So I can only conclude basically from the presentation you made that the budget was started with the assumption that you could not ask for or get approved a dues increase, and that you backed your way into a budget that would not result in a dues increase. So I don't think that's a smart way to run an organization. And I ask you to comment to us at some point in time about the board's thinking around the gap between the consumer price index gradual continued increase and the lack of increase in dues. So was the budget put together around the question, what are the real needs of the community and what would a realistic budget be and how would that translate into dues increases over time? Was it that, or was it simply said, we can't afford or we don't think we can pass the political pressure coming back at us to do what we think is needed? So we'll propose something that is inadequate. The forestry management topic would be a good example. Roads are another example. There's many examples in here of inadequately funding either operations or capital reserves in this community for 45 years. So that's my question. What was the board's thinking around that with respect to this year's budget?
So let me see if I can try to answer that. Thank you for that question. So if I'm understanding you, you're making reference to the fact that because we haven't had dues increases regularly, that our income is falling behind in being able to accomplish what needs to be done. Is that what you're trying to say? Okay, so right now, our dues, the amount that we're able to increase dues is limited to 7%. Now that's going to change when Kiowa goes into effect in 2028. But so that's why the board set the dues increase at 7% this year. That's as high as we could go. We do feel like the majority of the board does feel like we are a little behind the curve in terms of if we had been increasing dues even at the CPI each year, a little bit each year, 2 or 3%, whatever that CPI is, we'd be in much better shape than where we are now. And so we are, in a sense, trying to play some catch up in that regard. And I'll leave it at that so we have more time for questions. So, the question is Kiowa going into effect, some of it now, or is it all in 2028? And the state legislature has adopted certain parts of that to take effect in 26. Some of it has already come into effect in terms of authorizing the board to adopt a budget, but still has to go for a vote. But so yeah, there are some changes that are going into effect in 2026, and that's another reason our legal costs are going to be probably higher. We're going to have some legal counsel to incorporate some of these changes. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I mean. There are some things that go into effect in 26. Yeah.
My question is really kind of specific because much of my other concerns were kind of dealt with. But I am a member of the community garden in Area Z, and it gives us a lot of joy. And you had mentioned, Mr. Heverling, is that your name? That there are no user fees, but in fact, our garden is in a real consternation because there is an effort to charge for water, and there was a mention of $3,000 a year, which would be a large cost for young families that are joining the garden and see it as a real benefit of this area. I also swim. I don't have a use for using that water. And the other garden does not have user fees. Area Z is in the area of gates 3, 9, and 13. We have no membership on the board. Everyone on the board is in areas 1 and 2. I kind of worry about that a little bit. We lost Nancy in the last election, and she did respond to our neighbors' concerns. And I know my husband has written 2 letters, gotten no response. One was about a stop sign. I live on Topper Drive, and people whiz onto Topper Drive to get to the trailhead, and it's dangerous because they can't see oncoming traffic, and so we asked for a warning sign. So I guess I'm curious about, will other clubs have user fees also? Will this go through? Do you have any comments?
Well, I mean, I can tell you in terms of, because I think your main question was the water, the garden club. And at this point, I mean, I can tell you it's not on the horizon to charge water. A meter has been installed and we're monitoring
Appreciate that.
water usage, but there is no plan to charge you for that water at this point. So I wouldn't worry about that right now.
It really is a concern. Our volunteer president has just been going crazy trying to communicate, and we're all worried about it. So it is something we can't have it. We have to have a 5-year agreement with you, and it hasn't been signed. So just be aware that it's causing a lot of worry.
Well, thank you very much. It is going to be coming up for board discussion very soon.
Hi there. So I'm going to start with a passage from the current Southern Valley newspaper in regards to the parking use assessment plan. And it says, with growing concerns about congestion, wear on facilities, and access limitation for residents, this initiative is designed to ensure that community amenities are equitably and sustainably managed. Over the last few days, should I start again? Should I start again? Okay. So over the last few days, the weather's been really good, and we've taken the opportunity to go both to the dog park and the marina and come here. And both times, I found it very parking. Commendable, because a lot of people are using the facilities, and this assessment plan is kind of in line with that. But I question the logic of building a facility here that would bring potentially hundreds of people and cars driving in here on a regular basis. If we have problems right now, what's going to happen with the volume of people quadrupling, quintupling, or more? As I drove in here through gate 1, beautiful area going through the trees, try to imagine every weekend hundreds of cars coming in. Where are the residents going to go? What's going to happen to them? One of the speakers earlier mentioned that it almost looks like we're trying to find ways to make money so we can spend it. I find it interesting that on one side we're assessing the accessibility, the road condition, and the abilities for the residents to use the facilities adequately, and people from the outside to come in and take those over. Interesting thought on my mind. Something to think about.
No, that's a very good point. I think that's another consideration that's being looked at by long-range planning in terms of what is the goal of any of our amenities here. It really should be for our members' use, and so I think the focus is going to be shifting from, not trying to build a venue that's going to attract outsiders, but to build an amenity that will serve the members and their needs. Yeah, so, right. I understood. And so that was another good amount of feedback that we got at our first barn town hall, was that very point that, and long-range planning, I serve on that committee as well. We heard that loud and clear, and so we're really trying to refocus these amenities towards member use and not drawing other people in. So good point.
Hi, my name's Gary Corsilia. I live on Bramble Way. I'd like to thank, I don't know your name, whoever made the presentation on the budget, Joel. One of the things that I noticed was in one of the departments, their electric utility costs went up like 1.6%, and I know that's not a realistic number for utility increases, while their communications costs went down 30-something%. And then in another group, their electric rates went down and their communications costs went up. So it seems like there's an inconsistent application of inflationary costs for the utilities. And that's just one thing that I noticed in today's presentation. So I'm going to have to look at the whole budget more carefully. And then I had another question. It's probably general accounting practices. The code numbers, the 4-digit code numbers, are those like state-driven, or are those, can I find where those mean something? Like 5,300 is salaries.
No, those are GL line items, and we don't have a requirement to follow like a state kind of GL system. So those are internal general ledger line
Okay.
items. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And another thing that I'll point out real fast about utilities, is accounts payable, the way that these bills come in and that they allocate certain expenses, by department and stuff like that, that has changed the last couple of years, especially with communications. So instead of actually having her change her allocations, I just changed the budget to now mirror kind of the allocations of where she's plugging those expenses. So that's why you can see some differences like from one year to the next in the budgeted expenses.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Barbara Michelson Harder from 172 Polo Park Drive. My comment is not directed at the budget, but since we've been talking about the new building or the possibility of changing it, I did notice that there's another long-range planning committee that's going to be happening on the 20th, and because somebody wasn't available, it's not going to be recorded, and I think they should all be recorded and available for view. It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a subcommittee. I think based on the relationship between the community and that we do want to know what's going on, and with the presentation of this new building and the fact that the advisory vote that was taken in 2023 when the population made it plain that what they wanted was a pavilion was totally ignored. I think that now everything needs to be transparent. So apparently I have fans in the audience. So, so can you please make that happen for the 20th? Well, okay, well, I think if it's not going to happen, then the date needs to be changed so that it can happen.
Yeah. So
So I do understand that it was a meeting that was added on and that the recording person said they weren't available. But my point is, if the recording person is not available, then you need to either find somebody else or you need to pick another date. Because I think it's really important that everything is transparent. So they didn't do it on purpose, it just kind of happened. But now they need to adjust it. That's my point.
So, well, yeah, it's really, so here's the thing. The town hall that we had on the Barnes presented some novel ideas that really made a lot of sense to long-range planning. And we felt like we needed some time to congeal those ideas for a presentation that will be made at the 27th. So it's not like we're trying to hide anything. We're trying to get organized. It's more of a work session for the committee so that we can bring a coherent plan for discussion at the 27th. So it's not like we're really hiding anything. And then we have the other issue with Spencer. And we're in a time crunch in terms of our budget as well. So we've got to get it scheduled as soon as we can. And there'll be, we'll see. Okay, Spencer?
Yeah, if I may. So everything is actually recorded. I am at all of these meetings. There's only a few of them that aren't recorded, more like private sort of like appeals meetings for ACC. Those are usually the ones that aren't typically uploaded. But yeah, like this one right now is recorded. I record STR, finance, long-range planning, all of that. Maybe we could do a little bit better of communicating and where that is on our YouTube channel, et cetera, but we do have all these things recorded and uploaded.
It's not going to be recorded, that's the problem, because you're not available. But they need to either make somebody available. That's what we were told.
Okay, we'll see if we can, see if we can't make that happen.
It's important.
I get it, I get it. I myself's going to be out of town, so I can't do it, but we'll make every effort to make that happen. I want to first reach out and just thank Spencer for coming. He changed his vacation so he could be here tonight. This morning to record this. So thank you, Spencer, for doing that. Appreciate it very much.
Seth Norman, 50 Grandview. I'm a little confused because after Mr. Carter's remark, you acknowledged that there are members of the board who think that we may have raised dues too slowly or too little, and that we may be in jeopardy. I understand that. We also have another observation here that we're being bombarded, really, since I've been here. The quality of the recreational experiences at AM/PM Beach and the marina are really degraded. They are degraded on your watch. We're overwhelming. I went down 3 days in a row to the marina and could not find a parking space. And my kids stopped going to AM/PM Beach because it was a zoo. All right? That needs to precipitate an ID system that reduces that kind of load, which will be more costs. And now we're also going to be assessed for another $6 million building and $24 a month for the most of our lives. I mean, how can you have them both at the same time? How can you discuss both of them at the same time? You're saying that we may need dues increases just to handle what we have. At the same time, we're going to build out. I don't get it.
Hi, Brad Edwards on Honeycomb Lane. I do appreciate the presentation. Budget's always a complicated thing, I think, and it's sorry, I do appreciate all the information that you gave today. I have a couple comments. It sounds like the building construction has been a change of heart of the committee. I did take some time and watch the Long Range Planning Committee. I think it was their last meeting. I tried to think at it from a holistic view, and it seemed like when I was watching it that the lens of committee members is maybe different and doesn't really represent the full socioeconomic diversity of the community. It seemed like a lot of pro-development, throwing around a lot of things that other people might not be comfortable with. And there's a lot of people, some of my neighbors included, that live on extremely tight fixed incomes. $13 a month for 20 years, $25 a month for 20 years might not make a difference to me, but it literally is, it's possibly going to make people have to move out of their homes if they have to do that, plus a 7% increases and all that. So I do appreciate that you're taking into account that we don't, it seems like at least people here, I speak for myself, don't want an event center. I don't need things, we moved here because it's quiet, it's peaceful. We don't want it run like a business, we want it run like a community, and I think there are other ways to foster community without building fancy buildings. So that would be my comment on that. My other thoughts too on AMPM Beach, we do use that a lot to canoe and kayak. Routinely when I go down there in the mornings, I'll pick up a bag of trash. The beach is just trashed after it's hot summer days. Parking's limited. The assessment that we're trying to do with the parking permits, it seems like the board is more going to, well, how can we make money off this by charging, which might reduce use a little bit, but doesn't solve the problem of the overburdened use of a pretty fragile ecosystem and environment there. So I think that maybe needs to be switched into how do we just make it a resident-only place, and I know that's complicated. We might have to switch back and lose the tax break. My understanding, it was $30,000 a year that we saved, which is $6 a year for a resident to keep the beaches private. I don't know if that's the numbers that are correct, but if they are, that would be something I think we should put up to the membership to see if they want to do that. And I do think another membership survey seems like it's kind of overdue now to see what the priorities are. And then my other question on the budget, when we built a few years back, I know the hazardous tree removal, which seems like that's a very large part of the budget, and understandably so. When we got estimates, they ranged widely from reputable tree companies in several orders of magnitude for the price to cut down trees. How often do we send out requests for proposals or bids for contracts to different tree companies to make sure that we're staying on a competitive front when it comes to that large expense?
No. Yeah, the other thing is Rawls is probably the most, has the most expertise in taking down very, very, very hazardous trees that nobody else will touch, literally. So, yeah, but it's a good question. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you all again for coming. Morning. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and see you around.